Okay, so we know Nakamura is a legendary blitz player, particularly online blitz. Having said that, I've always felt Carlsen was a little bit better. And coming into this match, Carlsen had been on a tear. We've never seen a world champion play this many games, and he was destroying everybody. He played Caruana, and I think he won by 18 points in their match. I mean, just total domination. So if I were putting my money on this, which I wasn't, I would have put it on Magnus Carlsen playing Hikaru in the Speed Chess Championship. Uh, I might have lost my money because Hikaru, ever since he started treating chess kind of like a hobby and streaming like as his profession, he's been playing the best chess of his life. And this is a really cool game. I think you're going to like it. It shows Carlsen's positional dominance, but it also shows Hikaru's tactical brilliance. Let's jump right in. Magnus has white, Hikaru has black, and Magnus plays d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, and very quickly we get the Catalan on the board. Obviously, a very popular opening, and Carlsen's been playing this a lot lately. Bishop e7, bishop g2, castles, castles, and here Nakamura takes on c4. A common idea for black. Basically, what he's saying is the time it takes white to recover this pawn, I'm going to try to get my pieces into an ideal place and challenge the bishop on g2. Queen to c2, aiming to take that pawn. And now a6. Now that's the threat here is to play b5 and create a strong pawn chain. So Magnus doesn't want that. He plays a4 to stop b5. Bishop d7. Nakamura wants to play the bishop to c6 to challenge that nice bishop on g2. Queen takes c4 and bishop to c6. And now bishop to g5. For quite a while, there's a battle over this e4 square. The bishop, at some point, not quite yet, but threatens to take the knight on f6, and then white can play e4. Can't do it just yet, but later he will be able to. And here the most common move is bishop to d5, just harassing white's queen a bit before proceeding. But here instead, Hikaru plays a5, which creates a strong point for his own pieces at b4, but does create a weakness in his position at b5 also, so it's a trade-off. Knight to c3, and now the threat of bishop takes knight followed by e4 is real. And knight to a6 is popular, aiming at b4. The only downside is after bishop takes knight, white would get the full pawn center, even though black would still have a playable position. The Nakamura plays knight b to d7, so that can't happen. If bishop takes f6, knight takes f6, and e4 is still completely under control. So Carlsen plays rook f to d1, supporting this important pawn and also placing his rook opposite black's queen. h6, putting the question to the bishop, make a decision, and Carlsen decides to go ahead and take that knight. He gives up the two bishops to black, but he does add to his control over e4. And now knight to e5, an interesting decision. This is still theory, but what Carlsen is doing is going to allow his great bishop at g2 to be traded off, which is what happens. And what he's saying is, yes, I've traded that off, but now I have a strong knight on e5, and I can attack b7 and even c7 a little more easily now. At the moment, in fact, Carlsen is just threatening to play d5, which would just be devastating. It would just completely open up the center, and black would be destroyed. So Hikaru plays c6 to stop that from happening. e4. Now he gets his full pawn center, as he's been aiming for. Bishop to b4. Aiming at e4, the threat is bishop takes knight, followed by knight takes e4, and queen to e2 to defend the e4 pawn. And in this position in the past, queen to c7 was played, but what Hikaru plays is queen to b6. Basically, he's changing his target. He's moving it from the e4 pawn to the d4 pawn. And you notice these strong players, they find one weakness and they dedicate all of their forces to it. And let's just watch how Hikaru attacks that d4 point. Rook a to c1, rook a to d8, attacking. Knight to f3, defending, and now he plans to double rooks, attacking the d4 pawn, put as much pressure on it as possible. Queen c2, and now bishop takes knight. Now, if he's attacking d4, why would he allow white to take with a pawn and strengthen this square? Well, what he's decided to do, he felt he couldn't just take the pawn directly. White could always defend it. Now he's going to attack it with c5, which is a thematic idea in these structures. c5 is played immediately. Rook to b1 hitting the queen. Queen goes back to c7, setting up a pin, so if black were to take on d4, he'd have to retake with a piece, and that would leave a weakness at c3, so white moves his queen out of that pin. Rook f to d8, doubling up on d4, and now rook to b5, counterattacking the c5 pawn, taking on d4. and b6, defending the a5 pawn and solidifying this structure. But Magnus says, well, I've got a target too, the b6 pawn. So he doubles rooks, aims directly at the b6 pawn. And Hikaru says, I'm going to let you have that pawn, but I'm going to attack this e4 pawn. So you can have b6, I'll take e4, and we'll make that's a good trade for black. A central pawn is more valuable. By the way, if you're getting value from this video, be sure to hit the subscribe and the like button and the bell notification for future videos. So what Carlsen does is he plays d5. Pawn takes, and here he's never intended to take back with the pawn. That would be just a blunder because Hikaru would take back with the knight. He wins a pawn, and that knight defends b6. The idea is to follow with rook b6 as an intermediate move, attacking the queen. And now Hikaru plays this. He plays the move queen to a8. Computers like this move queen to c7, and after e5, knight to e4, they see this as a fairly equal position. Computers don't like queen to a8, but queen to a8 is a kind of a sneaky move. You notice what he's doing. He's keeping his queen on this long light square diagonal, aiming at Magnus's king on g2, which leaves all kinds of possible dangers for white. He's got to always be careful about. e4, knight e4, and here Magnus had a really strong move, knight to d4, and basically it just makes black's pieces look kind of silly. The rooks are blocked by their pawn at d5. The queen, the diagonal, is now blocked. This would have been a very strong move from Magnus, but instead he plays rook to a6, attacking the queen. And here, queen to c8 is played, and this is a really dangerous move. It doesn't look like much. It looks like he's just moving the queen. But now this queen can come over to the king side and take advantage of all these weak light squares a little bit later. So Magnus has to be very careful. Rook b to b6. The idea of maybe playing rook to c6, harassing the queen further. Knight to c5, aims at the rook at a6. Rook takes a5. But now, boom, d4. Because he's moved the knight, it doesn't hang. And all of a sudden, this pawn, it's almost impossible to blockade it. These rooks are now strong, supporting a passed pawn in the middle of the board, and this long diagonal is open. So white has to be very, very careful here. Queen to c4, attacking the knight twice with the rook and the queen. Rook to c7 to defend the knight. Queen to b4, and now knight to d3. So this move contains a massive threat. And it's not like Magnus to miss a tactical shot. The best move for white here was queen to d2, which helps control the f4 square. What Magnus played instead was queen to b5, aiming at the knight. And here, Hikaru plays a move that introduces a checkmate in 10 moves. Do you see it? I think I've already given it away a little bit. That's right, knight to f4 check. And that's it. White is completely lost from this position, just like that. Let's look at the longest mate. If white takes the knight, then queen to g4 check, king to f1, excuse me, queen takes f3 with the threat of rook to c1 coming in and mating. Rook to c6 would block that. Now d3. Now the threat is queen to h1 mate because the pawn takes away the e2 square. Queen to d5 helps stop that, but he has to just give up pieces basically to delay the mate. Gives up the queen, gives up the rook. King to g1, rook takes c6, h3. And that is the mate in 10. What happened in the game is that Magnus played the move king to h1, and after queen to h3, he resigned. And this is the reason. If pawn takes knight to stop the mate at g2, rook to c1 check, knight to g1, and queen to f3 is mate, because the knight cannot take the queen as it is pinned by the rook at c1. A brilliant attack from Hikaru Nakamura. Now, even after going over this great game from Hikaru, there is still some great chess you're missing out on. To fix that problem, believe it or not, the key game you're going to want to check out is this game right here. So make sure to check out this game for some really mind-blowing chess.